Hey guys, Greg Kamer here. I just wanted to make a short video on how to set up active standby geo-redundant clusters in the Smart Zone. We'll be working off of VSZH and 5.1.1.
And hello everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and do a short video on how to set up the active standby geo-redundancy. Pretty straightforward. So I've got my two machines here. Now it's just one machine per cluster. I don't have a lab to go too big. Got one on each, two different clusters. You see network fuse-C1 and then network fuse-C2. So two independent clusters from one another. This guy here, this 192.168.121, this is going to be my follower. So I do want to show you, this guy just got factory defaulted. I do want to show you the licenses I have here. So you'll notice I have all of these licenses. None of them say HA, right? Because currently there is no HA licenses. It's here rather. It just doesn't show up because it's not in an HA configuration. So also, let's go back here, look at cluster, and you'll notice the cluster redundancy is disabled, no data planes, etc. Okay, so let's go over to this guy. So this is going to be my leader. We go look at cluster. You're going to see I have two data planes here. The cluster redundancy is currently disabled, so let's go ahead and configure that. I'll turn it on. Active standby. I'll make another video later for active. It's a little bit more involved, but not too bad. So let's go ahead, let's do the password first. All right, now let's do the IP address of that cluster. Don't look at me while I type, I get very nervous. All right, schedule, I'll just go ahead and set it at midnight, whichever you want to do. You do need to sync this at least once because it's going to need that config, because if you don't, it fails over, you're kind of screwed. So even if you disable this, it's going to sync it anyway. So let's just go ahead and do the config sync. Hit OK here. Now, assuming this all goes through, what will happen on this next page, it's going to pop up and it's going to show that, right? And it's going to go ahead and run my config backup. So while this is going on, let's jump to this other machine. And let's refresh and see if it notices that it's part of the cluster yet. Yep. All right. So now you see the cluster redundancy. It's coming online. It's going to take a little bit to come up, but you see the standby role is active currently. Now, if we go to administration, let's go look at backup and restore. It's probably not done yet, but what you'll see eventually here is you're going to see a system config backup, and that's the actual backup that's happening here. So once that config is done, or that backup is done, I should say, we'll eventually see that over here. So it generally takes a couple minutes. I don't honestly know if when you do your secondary and third and fourth and fifth syncs, if it's just delta changes or not. I kind of don't think so. It seems pretty straightforward on how that works, but this is a total config backup here. So let's go to system and cluster and see where we see in the config. Still the cluster state is not applicable. Still running this backup here. So generally takes a couple minutes. So here's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm going to let this run. I'm going to go pause it. And then once this is done, I'll flip back, kind of show you some screenshots, and then we'll actually simulate a failover. So stay tuned for that next part. All right, so you can see down here the sync up for the config file was successful. So if we go over here, we can indeed see there's this 19 meg backup file size that just got pushed down. So now we'll go just look at cluster, see what it thinks it is right now. Still says NA, should come up here in just a bit. Nope, now it's in service, didn't let it refresh. All right, so now we're gonna fail over, or simulate a failover. So we're gonna do this by logging into vSphere in my environment. And I will find that VM, this guy. I'm gonna edit this, and then I'm going to disconnect, right? So what this will do basically is gonna start to trigger a failover. That takes a bit of time. So instead of kind of sitting here and waiting, what I'm going to do is I'll pause the video. I'll probably come back in eventually because you'll start to see things like the data planes will pop over, the APs will pop over, or AP in my case, only have one for this. But you'll start to see these things kind of happening in the failover. And I'll come back and kind of show you what that looks like. So stay tuned for that too. Okay guys, a little bit of a development here. So on the actual standby cluster, it does say that the cluster is out of service. I don't see the data planes just yet. I'm sure they're going to be failing over here soon. Let's go and look and see if the AP's failed over yet. I don't think so. It's usually about 6 to 8 minutes in my testing, so yeah, we don't see it yet. They will fail over, and I've seen in the past, even before it does the initial restore of the config. So a couple minutes before we got that status, but still kind of working on it, letting the other things fail over. So stay tuned. All right, so it's been a few more minutes. See, both of the actual data planes have failed over. They're still in initializing and pending state, but they're there. And if we go and look at the access points, this new guy is online too. Now, in my environment, I'm actually not doing tunneling in this case as far as this lab setup is concerned. It's pretty simple. So I have an SSID broadcasting called wellnest.io as part of this network fuse training. So it's still up and running. It is set to local breakout, so the customers aren't really going to know anything's going on here. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just keep waiting. And I'm also going to stop saying stay tuned. So I'll pause it again, and then once we've actually gone through the whole failover, I'll bring it up, kind of show you what it looks like, and then we'll fail back. Right, so it's been about 25 minutes, all said from the first time we failed. And let's hit cluster here. You'll see that at least one of them is managed and approved. The other one's still initializing. But the configuration, and keep in mind this is my standby, right? Still saying out of service. The redundant role says it's standby, but it is running. So if we go and look at our access points, we've got all our zones, domains, all that stuff. So that's all good. That was what my other one had. Now let's go look at the administration and licenses here. And you'll notice that all of those licenses are here. You see the backup from active, but you also see that capacity AP-HA. So these are the licenses that you have to have on that node. So all the other licenses failed over. You'll see the serial numbers, things of that nature. So good to go. The only two things that you'll see that are bound to this node as it shows now is the actual, the AP-HA and the instance of the VSCG. So good to go there. Now let's go. Let me go ahead. This guy's still down, so let me go ahead and get him back online. So I'm going to show you how to rehome the cluster just in case you wanted to. Because one thing you're going to notice, like for example, I realized I screwed up the name of this wireless LAN earlier. So you see Wellnest, I actually misspelled it. It has one L instead of two. So if I configure here and I say I want to put that second L in. Okay, right. Nope, because it's a standby cluster. So this is really just more about uptime, not config. This is not meant to be a long-term solution, right? This is supposed to be just to keep you up and running in the case of a failure. So let's go ahead and log in here. And this guy's gonna be up and ready to go pretty quickly, but what'll happen is if I try to go now, and say for example I go to, let me go back to access points here, and I say I want to rehome the active cluster. If I try to do this, it's gonna fail because it's not gonna, let's just see. It's going to say that it's not going to find it, or at least that's what it should have said, but it didn't. So let's see if we start seeing this stuff fail back over here. So, yep, there's the Wellnest, which I still need to fix. The access point's probably going to still show. Well, he already fell back over. And let's look at the cluster here with the two data planes. They're still disconnected, but they'll be coming back shortly. So yeah, that's kind of the large and the small of it as far as how that works for active standby. I will be doing another one on active. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks a lot for watching.